Hello and welcome to Media 7. In this week's show, we'll discuss the uses and abuses of the Official Information Act, the groundbreaking law passed in 1982. We'll show you how to make your own request under the Act and talk about how it's working. But first, we're pleased to have on hand a man whose working life has often touched on what's fit for the public to know. Dominion Post editor Tim Pankhurst is leaving his role after 34 years in newspaper journalism to become Chief Executive of the Newspaper Publishers Association. Tim, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Russell.
Now, every journalist has a how I got started in journalism story. What's yours?
I had the great good fortune to start on a small suburban chain in Wellington called Sentinel Newspapers, where I think they hired the first person who came in the door, and three of us used to crank out 6 papers over a couple of weeks.
Did you learn from that, having to do all those different things?
Sure did, and on day 2 I think I was also handed the camera and said, by the way, there's a dark room, you also have to take the photos. So yeah, it was a pretty steep learning curve.
Was journalism your first job?
No, it wasn't. I knocked around a fair bit. I was a deckhand on a scallop boat. I was a labourer on Nelson Polytech, and I also had an attempt at being a trainee lab technologist at Wellington Hospital, but none of them stuck.
That would be unusual now, because the practice is normally for young journalists to leave school, go through a training course and then start at the newspaper. Do you think we've lost something in the fact that people don't do other things before they become journalists?
Yes and no. They come out of university with pretty good degrees these days. You know, we've got a lot of staff who have law degrees and so on. And they have a greater life experience when they come on sort of in their mid-20s. But we don't get many people from the other side of the tracks. And it will be nice to have, I think, more people in the newsrooms who have knocked around, and also those who come from different ethnic groups. So
what's the first thing you have to teach a young reporter when he or she comes in the door? What don't the courses do?
To recognise a news story. They're pretty good with their shorthand. They don't pass unless they get 80 words a minute. They know how to report a court case and so on. But a lot of them don't understand what makes a story, why a story is interesting, why should the reader care. So we often have to retrain them, take them through those aspects.
Now, you, at the other end of the process, you've hung in there 34 years. You've given it a pretty good shot. Do you worry about the flow of talent out of journalism and print journalism in particular?
I worry that there are so many people in PR. I mean, there's more people trying to block what we do, a lot of experienced journalists working to frustrate the news process. So that's a worry. There's hundreds of them in Wellington in various departments. God knows what they all do.
Why do you think they do it? Why do they walk out on journalism, which has a certain sex appeal, being a journalist? You know, you can flatter yourself in all kinds of ways, and yet they walk out on that. Is it the pay, or because they don't like the work?
I think, you know, we offer them poor pay and long hours and lots of glamour, and they sometimes elect to go and you know, pick up 90 or 100 grand sitting behind a desk and going home at 5 to 5. I just can't understand it.
How do we keep them there? Because it does seem to me that there is a developing crisis of people getting out of print in particular.
Look, I don't think it's a crisis, but I mean, it is beholden on us to reward the really good ones, pay them over the odds, and really encourage them, and show them that there is a career path, give them heaps of feedback, tell them that we really value what they do, because you know, they're special people with rare skills.
Now, you've been notable under your editorship for giving someone like Phil Kitchen his head and actually letting him pursue a story over time. Is that a difficult thing to do when you've got resource constraints?
Look, it is, but it's the absolute key to the success of what Phil Kitchen's done. We took him off the day-to-day assignment sheet, and Phil drives himself pretty hard. So I'd never worried in the slightest if he didn't file anything for a month, because I knew darn well he was chasing a lot of things. And he actually stayed at my place overnight, and we totted up this morning, and we came up with 10 people that have gone to jail as a result of his stories. So he's got a pretty good tally there.
Is that becoming a harder call to make now that newsrooms themselves are shrinking? I mean, I think the Herald newsroom half the size it was in the 90s. Does it become difficult to let someone pursue a story for that long?
It does need a strong commitment from management, and it needs a special reporter who will deliver. And in the case of Phil Kitchen, I think the country's best investigative reporter, and needs to be given his head. An editor on another paper said to me, "Where do I find another Phil Kitchen?" And I said, "Well, I'm aware of 2 of them on your staff, are well capable of that sort of work, but you've got to give them their head."
So that's part of the editor's role, is to actually spot talent and know who to give some rope to.
Yes, it is, and to keep management and the bean counters away from them.
Now, yes, indeed. I think you've been editor of what? The Press, the Waikato Times, the Dominion, the Evening Post, and the Dominion Post. That's 5.
Not the Dominion.
No, not the Dominion. Sorry. Okay, which was your favourite?
Look, they all had different challenges, and I really couldn't single one out. But they're all special. All had their tough times, but all pretty rewarding as well.
Now, you've also been an editor in the time when the internet has entered the news business and become absolutely crucial to it. What was it like getting your head around that and working out how you'd use it? Did you feel not up to the job initially?
Initially, it was pretty tough and scary. 3, 4, 5 years ago, we were thinking, especially older print guys like me, hell, this is going to spell the end of, could well spell the end of print journalism. We're much more excited and positive about it today. We've got much smarter at breaking stories online, keeping exclusive content for print, and using print to develop and explain the why. And we've got a long way to go yet, but I think we've got much smarter at driving readers between print and online platforms. And we have a bigger audience, more readers than we have ever had.
And also you've got deadlines throughout the day, which is a completely new thing for newspapers. You used to know that you didn't have to file your story until a certain time because it wasn't going in till the next day. How has that changed things? Does it make it harder to manage?
Look, it doesn't. It's actually quite exciting and liberating to be able to do what radio and television have always done, to break instant news. And I think the most gratifying aspect of it is the way the journalists have responded. They haven't said, no, that's not our role, we're not going to do these things. They've said, give us the training, give us the tools, and have really gone for it.
Now, newspapers in general, as anyone who reads the news knows, are having a tough time at the moment worldwide. How do you feel about the future of the newspaper?
In this country, pretty good. I do believe the power of print is undiminished, and our readerships are holding up really well. Across the Mets, 2 of the 5 are up, 08 on 07, and the others only slightly down. So, the figures show you that the readership is still there. Yep, there are lots of pressures, but we are in fairly tough times at the moment. The Great Recession, as the Americans are calling it, and that is impacting on every enterprise. But we'll come through that okay.
Another thing that the current problems for newspapers has drawn is the idea that there's something wrong with newspaper ownership structures, and people point to The Guardian, which is owned by an editorial trust and seems to flourish under that compared to, say, some of the American papers which have been bought by companies which have a lot of debt on their balance sheets and go down with the companies that buy them.
Yes. Yeah, newspapers generally are still very, very profitable models, and they certainly are in this country. But you're right, some of them have been saddled with some terribly incompetent managements and some balance sheets with enormous debt that are killing them. And, that is dragging down some of the great titles in the US and to a lesser extent the UK. But there are strains, but you're not seeing that happening in Australia and New Zealand.
Do you think there's anything in the idea that newspapers in New Zealand in particular have been cash cows for proprietors? As you say, they're very profitable. should more have been invested in the news operation rather than delivered back as dividends?
I would argue that, and also more should have been invested in printing plants, and
which is a very old-fashioned thing to say, that we need bigger printing plants.
You still need, you know, newspapers are going to be around for a long, long time. There's no denying that you know, digital is growing, but newspapers have so much more colour in them than they used to. They're much better produced, but printing presses wear out, and there do need to be long-term replacement plans. And you know, it was only last year that Rupert Murdoch invested, I think, 500 million in, you know, state-of-the-art printing plants. He's a visionary in the media world, despite all the criticisms of him, and you know, he sees a future there.
What's been the hardest call you've had to make as an editor?
I think the one that probably was the most difficult and had the biggest fallout was publishing the Muhammad cartoons. When it became known that the Dominion Post was going to do that, I had a call from the Prime Minister's office saying that if you proceed with that, three things will happen. Hamid Sudan, who was then a prisoner in Iraq, will be killed. New Zealand forces in Afghanistan will be targeted, and we will lose our dairy trade. They were fairly heavy things to put on us.
So that gave you greater pause for thought than, say, responses from readers who said they were desperately upset?
Yeah, I mean, there was considerable fallout, but the people who were the most reasonable and the easiest to deal with were the Muslim community. Javed Khan, who I met with a number of other people, understood that freedom of speech issues in our country are really, really important, and that whilst we had done something that offended them, they could understand where we were coming from.
Indeed. Now, we're going to go to another difficult decision to which you're a party. Tim played a pivotal role in the merger of the Dominion and Evening Post newspapers. In this week's Take Two, Sarah Daniel scans her own back pages. Here are excerpts from the documentary she made with James Hollings and Dan Cleary about the last week of the last post.
I've described the working for the Evening Post as the Post was a sensible, caring, considerate, compassionate, decent newspaper. It was the paper you'd probably marry. The Dominion was the paper you'd have an affair with. Cheap and slutty and tarty, but I'm now going to work for that cheap and slutty and tarty.
As you're aware, INL has announced today that it is proposing to merge the Evening Post and the Dominion.
Even from the day old Henry Blundell started it, it was the only record of the town and the people that were in it. The running races, the milk tokens, the price of fish, the buses and the trams. It's a whole social record.
We've always held a mirror up to Wellington and showed the citizens what they are, for good and bad. I guess I felt poleaxe 3 times in my life. Once was when my father died and I was 19. Second time was when I knew I had MS. And the third time was when I heard about the Post.
I remember first arriving on the paper and how passionate Sue Carty was. She came and spoke to us and she said, well, I don't care how you get your stories, bar lying down and sleeping with somebody. And I always thought, oh, that's so hilarious. That's sort of like Lou Grant or something.
When I first came here, it was a very cosy, comforting sort of place. It was like working in a warm bath. Because the Post then was a complacent paper. It had no reason to be anything else. No one threatened it. It was overwhelmingly dominant in the market. But the great thing is that it's continued to be a very congenial paper to work on.
I would rather that the Post went out a good newspaper, a newspaper that was respected, a newspaper that people looked up to, than to have continued a trend where circulation was declining and in the end the public has no respect for you.
How long have you been living here, Vladimir?
Oh, 30-something years.
And you get the Post all of those days?
All those days, yes. And now it's coming to an end. in Wellington is a beautiful city. Gorgeous.
Bullshit.
She said bullshit.
Sarah Daniel with that report. Tim, did you share the tea there?
Just about.
Well, thank you very much for your time and best of luck with your new role.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, after the break, the Official Information Act and how public is public information really?